Hello, welcome to the programme. We're at Kyiv Media Week and joining us is Karni Ziv, the head of drama and comedy at Keshet Broadcasting in Israel. Hello, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, nice to be here.
So you have amazing experience in television in Israel. You've worked for over 2 decades in this, and one of your great successes that you're linked to is Homeland, because until yesterday I didn't realise, firstly, that Homeland was made 6 or 7 years ago, which is incredible. I remember watching this and time flies. But secondly, is that the original version, called Prisoners of War, was actually made in Israel, and not many people know this. So as a person who's worked in this industry for such a long time, how do you take these sort of local series that were made like Prisoners of War and adapt them to a global audience or for other markets? Like, what's the recipe?
First of all, I won't take credit for Prisoners of War and Homeland because it was before I came to Keshet. But I think you're correct that that was the big step of the Israeli series going global. I think that opened the doors for a lot of Keshet series and a lot of Israeli content in a whole. I don't think we have a secret, and if we'll find it, we won't tell anybody. But I think the main thing is we have very Israeli stories, but in the center they have an emotional core that can go global. There are relationship or emotional feelings or character that looks to us very Israeli, but in his heart, in the bottom of that series, it's something very global. For instance, I think that the A word that in Israel was yellow peppers. It's about a family that is raising an autistic kid. And I felt when I watched it that it's a very Israeli series because the family was very Israel, the tightness of that family living in a far distance village in the south of Israel, and I felt that they are very Israelis. But the core of the story of a family dealing with first of the secret of autistic kid and then sharing it, sharing secrets with the whole community, it's something that can travel. And the best example is, of course, the British A word that is now going for a 3rd season, even more than the Israeli series, because the British writer found what touched him in our story.
Because he had a son, right? Wasn't
he?
He
has an autistic son, and our writer has an autistic son too. And he found his story in that Israeli story, and in that way he made it very British. So in a way it's very similar, and in a way it's very different. And I think the secret is we write a very Israeli local story, but then when you want to make it in another territory, you need to find the right writer, like you found the right writer in Israel. You need to find the right writer in that territory that will find what touches him in that story and what makes it his voice in that story.
I mean, in a lot of the good series, the writers are actually personally affected by the stories. They have knowledge of the problems, solutions.
I think always. I think the connection between the writer and the story is the most important thing in making good television. And I think that's why, not in a very good way, we don't have a writer's room with a lot of people writing a story in or a genre like a cop series or law firms or hospital, because in Israel the writer is in the heart of the story and it's something that he needs to write, and most of the time he will write it alone because it's his or her story.
So what do you think actually makes Israel stand out on the global market? Is it the sort of entrepreneurship? Is it the fact that they understand technology a bit more? Is it the fact that perhaps they have a natural way of telling stories that's perhaps attractive to other people or other markets? So what do you think?
So as I said, first and foremost, the Israeli writers and the way that they want to share a story. They want to share stories that the Israeli viewers and then probably all over the world will connect emotionally, but they find a very unique angle to tell that story. And on the other hand, I think that the fact that we produce in quite low budgets in Israel series that looks quite good. I think most of the time people are surprised from our budgets and how well our shows look. This is part of it too. And the world became smaller because of technology, because of the thirst to good content. So people are more open and there's more willingness to hear and watch content not just in English. So that's another thing that happened and helped us with our content.
You know, actually that's interesting because the other week I was watching, it was a French drama, and I was watching it on an online, and this drama was fantastic, I have to say, but I'll tell you after. It was called Le Montre, it's called, but it's really good. And the way it was shot, the different scenes, the story, the sort of the tension that it built up, but it was in French. And actually I thought, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be in English. In fact, if it was in English, it would probably sort of destroy the whole idea of it. And it's the same in Hebrew.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that maybe the Norwegians were the first that opened that possibility. Series like The Bridge, The Tunnel, you don't care that they're speaking Swedish and Danish. The story is so good and the characters are so appealing. So you don't care that you don't understand the language. And I think that opened a lot of opportunities for other languages all over the world.
I wanted to ask you about the art of storytelling as well, because obviously I'm sure you have papers and proposals on your desk every day, and you said in the presentation that it's your pleasure that people come up and tell stories to you, and you look at them. But how do you think for perhaps people in Ukraine who are looking to develop a script, a story perhaps that even affects them, where do they start? Like, what is there a secret to the art of storytelling? Has it changed? Or is there not really a formula, you could say, that works?
I don't think that there's a formula. It did improve a lot in the last couple of years. I mean, because we are so flooded with a lot of content, so the storyteller, the writer, needs to know what is he going to tell, what is his story about. You need to be very clear, you need to catch me in the first 5 minutes.
So what is it then? As soon as you see the paper, you know, it's like what do they call it? A lift proposal, you know?
Sometimes it is. Sometimes they come to my room and they tell me the first scene, and I'm there. And sometimes they tell me the first scene and I'm not interested at all. They didn't get me. As a head of drama, I need to feel the connection between the writer and the story that he's going to tell. It's not always his really personal story, but there's always personal connection for him, personal meaning. He wants to say something. It can be in the main character, but sometimes it's not the main character. It's another character in the story that is him. But I need to feel the connection in that story, and yet he needs to be very clear. I need to understand very quickly what is that story about and why is it different from 1,000 other stories that I just heard in the last couple of years.
It's a tough job. Actually, when you were giving a presentation earlier on and you put together the original and the adaptations, I was thinking, wow, these are so similar. You know, it's not like they rewrite the scripts, they literally copy what was more or less done. But what makes something Israeli No, I stayed in Israel for a while, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would make it especially Israeli.
Maybe only Israelis can feel that it's very Israeli.
This is what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think so. Probably in Ukraine you will feel that something is very Ukrainian because you live here and you know the culture and the small jokes and the slang and the way people behave, and you can watch, you can see a character and say, I know that mom, I know that behavior, I know that family dinner on Friday night, this is very, very Israeli. And then when another writer somewhere else in another territory will take that story, he will find what relates to his culture, to his family, to what he knows, and suddenly you will find that the same family dinner Israeli on Friday night is very similar to lunch on Sunday, maybe, in another territories, and it looks the same, although it's in a different language and these are different people.
Yeah, and actually another thing you said that was very interesting in your presentation was the fact that a lot of the topics that you cover in drama is actually what people experience in real life, because a lot of people who script writers and directors and editors, they might think, oh, I better not touch this topic because this affects people too much, or they perhaps don't want to hear about this, whether it's war, whether it's perhaps disability, something like this. But actually it's the opposite, isn't it?
I
Do you
think
that's a fair
that most
assessment?
of the Israeli writers, they found a way to tell very deep stories and moving stories, but to cover it or to help our audience to go through. Two examples, okay, the A word is about an autistic kid. You will say, I don't want to see a family that needs to raise an autistic kid, but it's so funny and warm, and this family is something that you want to be part of that family.
So is this a trend then, the sort of warmer stories? Or?
I don't think it's a trend. I think that's the way they write. I think that they know that Israeli audience needs a warm story, something that will warm your heart, something that has a core of optimism. So although you will tell a story about post-traumatic guys from the army, the cover will be a fairy tale. They are going to save a princess from the jungle. And underneath, it's a very heartful story about guys that were traumatized from their service in the army. And they have internal wounds and they need to get healed. But the cover is a very romantic story. And this is why I think people in Israel and hopefully all over the world were connected to that story, because it was deep and moving and sometimes hurtful, but it was warm and optimistic, and in a way we had like a good ending, not complete, but yeah.
Well, it's fascinating. My last question is about not so much the storytelling, but the distribution of these different series that filmmakers produce. Is it getting more difficult, or do you think that the sort of progression of technology, as we said, through online streaming services, is actually making it easier for perhaps people who don't have so much of a budget, who perhaps I wouldn't say don't have the skill level, but are sort of new to the industry? Do you think it makes it easier, or do you think it makes it tougher because there's so much more competition now?
I think it makes it both. Easier because there are more platforms, the world have become smaller, people are watching different series, different length, they see digital content in very low budgets. They can hear now series that are speaking foreign languages. So in a way, it's easier. But on the other hand, there are so much good content around. So it becomes more difficult to be out there, to be loud, to be heard, to be different. And that's a mission. In that ocean of very good content, you need to be very special.
And this is what you're seeking to do.
I'm trying every day, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.